This clip is brought to you by Piedmontese Beef, the best beef on the planet. Use code POWER for 25% off your entire order. Enjoy the clip and enjoy your meat.
When it comes to something like weight gain, sometimes even that gets to be complicated because, does the player really need to gain weight, or does he need to just be stronger? Is that the reason why you want someone to gain weight, or do you want them to gain weight because a center typically weighs this much, or a forward, typically weighs this much? But again, what's the reason why, you want someone to be that heavy? Maybe for a particular athlete, it might slow them down too much.
Mm-hmm.
How do you go about getting some of the guys bigger? That's got to be challenging because you're trying to keep them athletic at the same time.
Yeah, for sure. And for our guys now, I just use NBA data. So there's a really cool analysis from 2018. They just averaged every draft pick and by position, by body weight, and some strength numbers because we have the combine data. So I use that as a rough rule.
Now you're lined up to get drafted.
Yeah, hey, man, you're 6'4", or you're 6'3", and that average, okay, even though the NBA's changed so much over time, it's kind of positionless now. But for the most part, okay, anyone who's 6'4" weighs 220. Okay, so you weigh 180. We got a long way to go.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it doesn't mean you have to be at 220 to get drafted. But if we know that that's an average, that's low-hanging fruit. Let's try to get you there. Now, that's a big gap, so we won't get you there. But to me, it's more of, can we create buy-in? Now you should gain weight. So one level is just that. Let's compare you to other people in the NBA because you're going to be going up against them. That's your dream. So let's help you get there. Mass also to me, so that's one level. The second layer is it becomes kind of at some level body armor, right? If you have really thin legs, for example, and you get ran around screens all of the time, and then you get kneed, well, if you have very thin legs and you just don't have the mass on top of that, now you'll get a bone bruise, and now you can't play for a week or two. And we've actually dealt with that. So when I had De'Aaron Fox, he was light as a feather, and that helps him. That's why he's so fast, and that's why he can jump so high. But those qualities only help if you can play. But if you're also so thin that every time you get kneed, you have to miss a game because literally it creates a bone bruise because you don't have the padding above it. Well, now the conversation is, hey, you don't need to gain mass necessarily because you're not strong enough. You just need the body armor. And then the last part is obviously that strength, right? We do know that cross-sectional area of strength are going to have relationships. So sometimes it's just, you're not strong enough. And our goal is actually strength, but what comes along with that is eating and sleeping and recovering, and that adds mass as well. So whenever I think of size, I kind of look at it like, okay, let's comp to NBA players. And then if we can't get there, is there a rationale for body armor because they're going to run you around screens and you're going to have to hit and bump? Play type comes to mind. Are you a physical guy? Do you create contact? And if so, you probably want to have maybe a stronger upper body or bigger upper body to create some contact. And then lastly is obviously that force component. You can build, the idea of building force independent of mass is, to me, an argument not worth having. Just get people stronger, and if weight comes along with that, great.
I'd agree, yeah.
And then if they need to gain weight, then get them to gain weight. And if strength doesn't come along with it, sometimes that's okay as well, right? Because sometimes it's just a mass conversation, right? Two bigs, two centers, all things being equal, the one who weighs more is probably going to be a little bit more effective, right? Because if your defender's pushing on you and you weigh 220 versus you weigh 250, well, that's just a heavier mass for them to push against. Even if you produce the same force as somebody who's 220, because that you producing force is either holding your own ground or creating some space. But if a defender has to push on you, having more weight is just more weight for them to push on. And over 40 minutes, do you want to push? If I'm a defender, I would rather push on a lighter person who's 220 than 250. And over 40 minutes, you'll break them down if you weigh a little bit more.
Some of these athletes are insanely strong on the court, right? There's some people you can't figure out how to, they can box you out and they can do all kinds of crazy stuff. And if you were to see them in the weight room, they put 185 pounds on their back and they just look like they don't even want to try to squat it, much less actually squat it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that brings in, obviously, to me, strength is a skill. And so there's so many athletes that are very strong in their sport, but they're not, quote unquote, strong in the weight room. And to me, that doesn't mean they can't produce force. It just means that they're not good at your movements. And that's okay because squatting is a skill, right? And so if you were to squat for years, you would get very good at the skill. But they don't need that skill to be good at their sport. They need force to be good at their sport. And a lot of them have that, right? And there's been times where I'll jump in and I'll try to guard somebody in the pro level or college level, and they're way stronger than me on the court. There's nothing I can do, but I bench, squat, and deadlift way more than them. And it just means that that's just a skill that they haven't cared to take on. And a lot of times it's justified because they've spent so much time developing their sports skill that they didn't need their strength in the weight room, right? And unless it's football, for the most part, that's probably going to go across almost every athlete. Football players are used to the weight room. Through high school, they'll use it, especially if you're at the D1 level, right? It's rare that you get to the D1 level in football and you haven't touched a weight. It's very common in other sports that the first time you've actually had consistent training was once you got to college. but they were just better than their peers, and that's how you get a D1 scholarship.
So, Power Project family, I hope you enjoyed this clip. We are on Discord and Reddit. We're trying to talk to you guys and build a community down there. So the links are in the bio. But remember, like, comment, subscribe, share this out with people so you can share the wealth of health. As cheesy as that fucking sounds. Peace.